Hey there. This lovely manhwa is titled The Princess's Dangerous Brothers. If you love stories like this, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you'll never miss the next episode. On a violent winter night, 11-year-old Lestia was dragged through snow-covered streets by debt collectors who had cornered her uncle. The thugs, led by a knife-wielding man with questionable negotiation skills, had discovered that her uncle's house contained nothing of value. When faced with a threat of losing fingers for each day of late payment, her uncle made what historians would later classify as the worst guardianship decision ever recorded. He offered his niece as payment instead of money. Lestia desperately protested, promising to work harder, selling flowers, and wake up earlier. Her uncle responded by telling her to shut up, reminding her that she supposedly owed him for food and shelter, and when she bit his arm in desperation, he struck her down into the snow. The man clearly had strong opinions about conflict resolution. As the lead thug approached the fallen girl, a commanding voice cut through the storm. A cloaked figure emerged from the swirling snow, a man named Lysion, wearing a dark hooded cloak with dramatic blue lining and an ornate brooch. The thugs, demonstrating their impressive lack of survival instincts, immediately threatened this mysterious newcomer. Lysion revealed himself to be a sorcerer and promptly educated the debt collectors on why threatening magic users is generally inadvisable. Fire and lightning erupted from his hands, sending the men sprawling across the snowy street, while one of them screamed about sorcerers as if he'd just discovered they existed. After the thugs fled with empty threats about revenge, another man, named Joel, approached. He greeted Lysion with familiar exasperation, noting that their brother Gerard had wanted them to quietly retrieve their sister. Apparently, magical light shows weren't part of the stealth plan. Joel knelt beside the bewildered Lestia and delivered news that would shatter her understanding of everything. He and Lysion were her brothers, and they had been searching for her. Lestia, who had lived her entire life knowing only that her mother died away from home and she'd been stuck with an abusive uncle, couldn't accept this revelation. To prove their claims, Joel demonstrated his wind magic by instantly drying her wet clothes, the first moment of genuine comfort she'd experienced in years. He studied her distinctive silver-gray eyes and cream-pale hair, the markers they'd been searching for, and confirmed she was their youngest sibling. Before they could leave in their waiting carriage, Joel noticed how thin and bruised Lestia appeared. When he gently grasped her arms, he discovered evidence of abuse hidden beneath her sleeves, though she deflected his concerned questions. Their departure was interrupted by the uncle, who came running through the snow, demanding Lestia back and claiming to be her family. This triggered a revelation that would expose years of deception. Joel informed the uncle that their father had provided 1,000 gold pieces 10 years ago for Lestia's care, enough money for a lifetime of comfort. The uncle's lies crumbled as the truth emerged. He had told Lestia that her parents gave him nothing, that she was a burden he bore out of duty. This deception had driven her to work desperately selling flowers, trying to earn enough to justify her existence while he lived off the substantial sum meant for her care. When Lestia began to question this betrayal, her uncle's response was characteristically abusive, telling her to shut up while squeezing her hand painfully. Joel, witnessing this casual cruelty, offered a simple business transaction: another 1,000 gold in exchange for the uncle's relinquishment of custody. The man's greed predictably won over any pretense of caring, and he eagerly accepted the money with promises to disappear forever. Standing in the snowy street with her old life in ruins and an uncertain future before her, Lestia faced the most important decision of her young life. Despite everything she had endured, the unknown terrified her more than familiar pain. What if these men weren't really her brothers? What if this was all an elaborate mistake? Lysian, perhaps understanding her hesitation, offered her something she had never truly possessed: the power of choice. He told her she could decide who she wanted as family, giving her agency in her own destiny for the first time. The encounter concluded with Lestia standing among mysteriously appearing flowers in the winter scene, torn between fear and desperate hope. Lysian held out his hand with small flames dancing across his fingertips, offering both literal warmth and the metaphorical promise of care, magic, and belonging. For Lestia, who had spent years shivering in a drafty hovel knowing only cold and darkness, this small flame represented everything she had never had. "It's so warm," she whispered, tears coming to her eyes as she reached toward the gentle light. In that moment of genuine warmth, she made her choice. "I will follow you." Joel's face broke into a genuine grin as he gently lifted her into his arms, and the harsh winter street seemed to transform into something that felt like hope itself. But their departure was interrupted by Lysian's sudden realization about their father's identity, prompting Joel to reveal that Lestia was the daughter of the former Duke of Verchester. The uncle's reaction was immediate terror upon learning he had been abusing the child of one of the realm's most powerful magical families. The Verchester name carried legendary weight. They were known for birthing generations of unparalleled sorcerers whose abilities were both admired and feared. A demonstration of magical energy shot past the uncle, leaving him in no doubt about the consequences of ever crossing them again. Under moonlight, a horse-drawn carriage carried Lestia away from her old life forever. Inside the luxurious interior, she sat between her brothers, overwhelmed by the ornate surroundings and consumed with anxiety about dirtying the seats with her worn clothes. Gerard, the eldest brother, who had joined them, noticed her distress and offered casual generosity that left Lestia marveling at such unconditional kindness. When the brothers attempted to explain their father's recent death by showing her a newspaper article, Lestia's shame deepened as she admitted she couldn't read. The silence that followed felt deafening until Lishan exploded with fury at the uncle's neglect, while Joel focused on reassuring her that she had done nothing wrong, a revolutionary concept for someone who had been blamed for everything. Instead of the article, Joel showed her a photograph of Gerard, explaining that their eldest brother was waiting at the imperial palace to inherit their father's title. When Lestia asked about their father, the brothers' responses revealed a complicated relationship. Lishan called him cold and foolish for abandoning such a lovely person, while Joel diplomatically suggested their father didn't matter anymore since she had brothers who cared about her. Joel's request for her to call him brother touched Lestia deeply, though she wondered if she really could. Before she could fully process this new dynamic, they arrived at the Verchester estate. The carriage emerged from a forest path to reveal a magnificent castle complex that seemed to belong in a fairy tale. Under the full moon, the grand mansion with its distinctive light blue roof glowed majestically against a mountain backdrop, surrounded by perfectly manicured grounds. Lestia pressed her face to the window in wonder, unable to comprehend that this palatial estate was supposedly her home. Upon arrival, they were greeted by Haylock, the distinguished head butler, and a line of maids. The butler immediately noticed Lestia's lack of mana neutralization stone and asked about her magical attribute, revealing another gap in her education. She had no idea she should possess magical abilities as a Verchester. When Lestia admitted she didn't know how to use magic, she feared this proved she wasn't truly a Verchester after all. But Lishan firmly contradicted her doubts, placing his hand protectively on her head and declaring that regardless of magical ability, she was undeniably a Verchester. To help her understand the magical world she was entering, Lishan showed her his mana neutralization stone, a beautiful golden bracelet with crimson gems. He explained that magical users needed these counterstones to control their abilities, as uncontrolled magic could be extremely dangerous, or even fatal. As he demonstrated how his stone absorbed excess magical energy, shifting from brilliant red to dull gray, Lishan revealed his perspective. Magic is bothersome at best and extremely dangerous at worst. But since you don't need any of this, you, Lestia, were born perfect. This declaration that she was perfect, something she had never been told in her entire life, left Lestia stunned. When Haluk apologized for his earlier assumptions about her magical abilities, she quickly assured him he had done nothing wrong, prompting Lishon to affectionately note that his little sister even had a big heart. Their tour was interrupted when Joel announced he was leaving to find their runaway third brother on Gerard's orders. This left Lishon alone with the responsibility of caring for their newly discovered sister, a task he accepted by announcing they should wash up and have dinner. Inside the magnificently lit estate, Hylock introduced Lestia to the staff assembled to serve her, including a red-haired woman named Dora, who would serve as her personal attendant. As they moved toward the living quarters, Lishon noticed Lestia favoring one foot and wincing when he steadied her. Her automatic response, I fell, revealed years of conditioning to cover for her uncle's abuse. Understanding the truth, Lishon simply lifted her into his arms to carry her. When they reached the washroom, Lishion's protective instincts clashed with propriety, as Dora gently pointed out that he couldn't follow them into the bathing area. His flustered retreat, insisting he was only helping because of her injured ankle, amused Dora, who called after him to bring medicine. In the bathing chamber, Lestia was overwhelmed by luxuries beyond her imagination, an ornate room with golden decorations and a large bathtub filled with warm water scattered with floating flower petals. As Dora helped her undress, she noticed the extent of Lestia's injuries, but tactfully avoided demanding explanations, instead focusing on gentle care. The warm, petal-filled bath was a revelation. Dora showed her colorful bath bubbles, creating iridescent foam that left Lestia exclaiming in wonder at the simple magic of soap bubbles, a completely new experience for someone who had never known such luxuries. As she settled into the flower-filled water, she marveled at how the gentle treatment, combined with healing oils, eased the constant pain she had grown accustomed to living with. When Dora presented her with a beautiful white nightgown, Lestia's hesitation revealed the depth of her unworthiness complex. "Am I allowed to wear something so nice?" she whispered, a question that broke Dora's heart. The maid's firm reassurance that she was a daughter of the Verchester family and deserved beautiful things helped. But Lestia privately resolved to leave when they discovered she wasn't their actual sister, though she admitted to herself she'd be sad when that day came. Unknown to Lestia, her rescue had been the result of family obligation rather than spontaneous discovery. In a cemetery where their father lay buried, the four Verchester brothers had gathered to discuss their newly discovered sister. Joel had explained that their father had known she was born without magic and abandoned her for that reason. Gerard, feeling responsible for righting their father's wrongs, had decided to bring her to the estate to live as a Verchester. But his duties, inheriting the ducal title, prevented him from undertaking the mission personally. Their third brother, Matthias, had run away seeking freedom from family obligations. This left Joel and Lishon to find her, though Lishon had initially been indifferent to the whole affair until Joel convinced him with a simple argument about what their sister would think if only one brother came to find her. In the ornate dining room, Lishon waited for Lestia's arrival. And when she appeared clean and cared for in her white nightgown, he couldn't help but think she looked cute, while also adjusting to the reality of having a younger sister to protect. The dining table was set with an elaborate spread of dishes, far more food than Lestia had ever seen in one place. But instead of showing excitement, she sat quietly, overwhelmed by the abundance and paralyzed by unfamiliar choices. When Lishon encouraged her to eat, she revealed another gap in her education. She didn't know which utensils to use from the formal place setting. "There are 5 forks," she said in bewilderment, her hands trembling as she tried to select the correct one. Her automatic apologies for being dumb prompted Lishon to make a declaration that would change everything for her. "From now on, I'm going to forgive you for whatever you do. You're allowed to do whatever you want around me, at least. This promise of unconditional acceptance was revolutionary for someone who had been blamed for everything. With the pressure of perfection lifted, Lestia was finally able to choose a dish and taste food prepared with care and skill. When she bit into the perfectly prepared lamb chops, her eyes widened with wonder at flavors she had never experienced, exclaiming that she had never eaten something so delicious before. The young girl finished her first proper meal at the Verchester estate, her face lighting up with genuine joy over flavors that weren't stale bread or leftover scraps. Lysian had served her throughout dinner like the world's most dedicated waiter, ensuring she tried every dish and ate her vegetables. When dinner ended and the girl tried to walk on her own, Lysian immediately swept her up into his arms again. She protested that she could walk perfectly fine, but he carried her through the ornate hallways anyway, apparently deciding that walking was now beneath her station. Dora opened the bedroom doors to reveal an opulent space that looked like a princess's dream. Pink bedding, golden accents, and sparkling details filled the room. The girls stood there in complete awe, as if she'd never seen such luxury before, which, given her background, she probably hadn't. After Dora left with cheerful instructions about the service rope, Lysian noticed something odd. Instead of approaching the magnificent four-poster bed, the girl was hiding behind a pink couch, clearly hesitant about something. When he asked what was wrong, she delivered a question that stopped him cold. "Am I allowed to sleep on it?" The question revealed just how deeply her deprivation ran. She explained that she'd been sleeping on rice stalks covered with fabric while her uncle took the only real bed. The revelation that she'd spent years sleeping on the floor because she wasn't head of household hit Lishan hard. He assured her emphatically that the room and everything in it belonged to her now. When she still seemed frozen with disbelief, he gently lifted her onto the bed himself, noting how frighteningly light she still felt despite the good meal. Then he asked if she hated her uncle. Her response showed remarkable maturity. Despite her suffering, she held no desire for revenge. She simply wished her uncle would stop drinking and find happiness. The girl's capacity for forgiveness exceeded that of most adults. Later, when Joel went to turn off the lamp, she immediately cried out in fear of the darkness. Instead of simply relighting it, Joel conjured magical light butterflies that filled the room with soft, warm radiance. He explained they were safe to touch and would stay with her until morning. The girl watched the magical display with wonder, asking technical questions about mana stones with surprising knowledge. As she settled into sleep surrounded by the glowing butterflies, she found herself wishing she could perform magic too, believing it might help the Verchesters truly accept her. Meanwhile, Lishan walked through the mansion's grand hallways, reflecting on their sudden family addition. He decided that gaining a sister overnight was strange, but preferable to acquiring another arrogant older brother. The evening marked Lestia's transition from sleeping on rice stalks to magical butterfly luxury, a transformation that seemed to happen as quickly as fairy tales promised it could. The next morning, Lestia awoke early in her luxurious bedroom, marveling at the opulent surroundings. She hugged a fluffy pink pillow and admired the antique books on her desk, though she hesitated to touch them since she couldn't read. When Dora arrived with breakfast, she gently scolded Lestia for not calling sooner and showed her how to use the bell pull for assistance. After learning that Lishan was busy with sword practice, Lestia felt grateful for everyone's efforts on her behalf. She asked Dora for a special favor, leading to an unusual scene in the courtyard. Lestia appeared in an elegant red dress, standing before a line of bowed household servants while presenting Lishan with a delicate paper flower she had crafted herself. She explained that during harder times, she had folded discarded newspapers into flowers to sell and now wanted to use this skill to express gratitude to those who had helped her. The The servants were flustered, insisting a lady shouldn't engage in such activities, but Lishan defended her choice. When Lestia offered him a pink paper flower specifically made for him, he accepted it and placed it in his shirt pocket, much to the staff's amazement. They had never seen their usually composed lord rendered nearly speechless by anyone's bold actions. Later, Lysian led Lestia to the family's grand library, a magnificent room with towering bookshelves reaching high ceilings. As he prepared tea, he jokingly suggested she could tear up books to make paper flowers if she wished, which horrified her completely. Left alone to explore, Lestia wandered among the countless volumes, wishing desperately she could read them all. Then something extraordinary caught her attention. One particular book seemed to be glowing with unusual light. Curious and bewildered, she climbed onto a cabinet to reach the glowing, red-bound tome. When she opened it, she discovered something impossible. She could read the text inside. The book contained definitions of magical modifiers written in ancient script that should have been incomprehensible, yet the words made perfect sense to her. In her excitement, she began reading aloud, her voice taking on a chanting quality as she pronounced the mystical phrases. The ancient words activated, building magical energy around her. The library shook with tremendous tremors that reverberated throughout the entire mansion. The magical explosion sent shockwaves through the estate. Staff members initially assumed Lord Matthias had returned and was causing his usual dramatic magical displays. But Lysian, preparing tea nearby, immediately realized something was wrong and rushed toward the library. What he discovered changed everything. Lestia stood among the bookshelves, still holding the ancient grimoire, with magical symbols and energy swirling around her. She continued speaking in the ancient language, causing reality itself to respond with power and light. Lysian stared in disbelief, recognizing what he witnessed. "No way! Is Lestia the interpreter?" he whispered, using a title for extraordinarily rare individuals born with natural ability to read ancient magical texts. The concept was legendary. In ancient times, most humans could use magic freely until that civilization vanished overnight, leaving only traces in grimoires and bloodline magic. Modern magic followed two paths: blood sorcerers who inherited abilities through family lines, and magic researchers who studied ancient texts to create magical tools. However, interpreting ancient grimoires had become increasingly difficult. The imperial families strictly regulated access to these texts, and most scholars spent years learning basic magical scripts. But very rarely, someone would be born with innate ability to read these languages naturally. These were called interpreters, valuable and potentially dangerous individuals. As the magical energy dissipated, Lestia looked up at Lysian with innocent confusion, asking if she had done something wrong. He carefully explained that reading the book wasn't forbidden, but suggested she master ordinary books first. When she asked what he meant, Lysian offered to teach her how to read starting the next day. Lestia was overwhelmed with gratitude at this generous offer, her joy infectious despite the gravity of what had occurred. Lysian encouraged her to eat more, noting her malnourished appearance, and watched as she contentedly munched cookies while their relationship deepened beyond formal noble boundaries. Meanwhile, political tensions brewed in the capital. At Duke Gerard's succession ceremony, Prince Urchin reluctantly attended a celebration thrown by the imperial family. The prince was displeased about being kept from returning home, particularly since the party had been organized without consulting him. The relationship between Urchin and Gerard was complex, built on over 10 years of acquaintance since their academy days. Their shared history included competitive sword duels with underlying tensions that went beyond academic rivalry. At the celebration, Urchin engaged Gerard in pleasant conversation while making sharp observations about his popularity among noblewomen, eager to catch the attention of the eligible bachelor Duke Verchester. Back at the succession ceremony, the conversation between Prince Urchin and Gerard took an ominous turn when Urchin casually mentioned their cute little sister. The prince's knowledge of Lestia's existence stunned Gerard, who immediately feared whether the imperial family also knew about her abilities as an interpreter. Urchin's interest in meeting the 11-year-old girl seemed calculated rather than innocent, despite Gerard's attempts to deflect with her young age. The prince's response revealed the harsh political reality. The Verchester bloodline was viewed as valuable assets, prized primarily for their magical abilities and potential to produce more sorcerers for the empire's military needs. The imperial family treated the Verchesters almost like prized livestock, dependent on mana neutralization stones provided exclusively by the crown. Without these stones, the Verchester siblings would be consumed by their own inherited magic, a fatal weakness that ensured their unwavering loyalty regardless of how they were treated. After maintaining diplomatic composure during their conversation, Prince Urchin's true feelings exploded in his private chambers. He raged about the good-for-nothing sorcerer and his arrogant attitude, destroying furniture while his attendants tried to calm him. However, his anger quickly transformed into calculation as he announced finding someone well acquainted with Lestia, suggesting sinister plans were already forming around the young girl. Several days passed peacefully at the Verchester estate. Lishan found himself pleasantly surprised by how well Lestia was adapting to aristocratic life. Haylock, the family's silver-haired butler, shared these observations, admitting that both he and Joel had initially worried about someone from the slums adjusting to their world. However, their concerns proved baseless thanks to Lestia's innate disposition and delightful personality. Lestia had thrown herself into learning everything about her new life, even approaching the chef to master proper table manners. Her eagerness and gratitude touched everyone who worked with her, though Lygian found himself wondering if she should be acting more spoiled at her age. Shouldn't an 11-year-old be more demanding? This realization that he genuinely worried about family affairs caught him off guard. Someone who had always maintained emotional distance from household matters now found himself concerned about Lestia's well-being, a change that was both unexpected and unsettling. His distracted state became apparent during sword practice, where his usual intensity was diminished. When Franker, one of the family's knights, arrived with his typical theatrical flair, he immediately complimented Lestia's beauty and good spirits while proclaiming himself the most flawless knight of all. The most meaningful revelation came when Franker invited Lestia to show off her reading progress. In their cozy study session, they discovered that Lygian had been using one of Lestia's paper flowers as a bookmark. This small gesture revealed more than any grand declaration. Despite his initial apparent indifference, he treasured her simple gifts, showing that the reserved lord was more affected by his new sister than he let on. Lestia was practicing her writing with a quill pen while Franker supervised her. She worked diligently, focusing on each letter with the determination of someone who truly wanted to learn. Franker found himself charmed by her dedication, thinking about how the household had gained not just a new member, but someone who brought out everyone's protective instincts. Their peaceful study session was suddenly shattered when the entire house began trembling. The chandeliers shook overhead as magical tremors announced someone's arrival. Lestia looked up confused, while Lygian calmly explained that the idiot had returned. Apparently, this was Matthias's usual method of transportation. Joel burst through the doorway, calling for his little sister, followed by Matthias, who immediately took offense when Lestia mistook him for Joel. The blonde-haired, purple-eyed young man proclaimed himself the cooler brother, sparking immediate competitive banter between the siblings. Joel had brought Lestia a gift, a large pink bunny plushie with a red bow that matched her eyes. Her delight was genuine and touching as she shyly asked if she could really keep such a wonderful present. The family watched as Lygian playfully fed cake to the stuffed animal while Lestia giggled. Matthias immediately nicknamed her Liti, claiming it came to him like destiny. Despite Lygian's obvious distaste for the casual nickname, Matthias swept Lestia up and spun her around the library. She laughed with pure joy, confessing that she had once watched other children play with their fathers this way and felt deeply jealous. Now she was experiencing that affection herself. When Lestia asked to be put down, she naturally called Matthias Brother Matthias, which created an awkward silence because she had never called Joel or Lygian brother. Realization hit everyone. She felt comfortable enough to use family terms with Matthias immediately, but had been too shy with the others. When encouraged, Lestia did call Joel Brother Joel, explaining that when he'd asked before, she found it too difficult to say. However, when it came to Li Xian, she hesitated and decided to save the brotherly title for Joel and Matthias only. Li Xian suggested she just call him by his name without the formal Lord prefix. Joel then requested to speak with Li Xian privately, leaving Matthias to entertain Lestia. When Matthias asked what they should play, her response revealed the tragedy of her childhood. She didn't know how to have fun. She had spent her days selling flowers and been punished for trying to interact with other children. "I don't know how to have fun," she admitted with heartbreaking honesty. Her idea of entertainment was studying with Li Xian, which she found incredibly enjoyable. Matthias noted she was definitely a true Verchester, given her love of learning. The situation became worse when Matthias discovered she had never left the estate grounds. With theatrical flair, he stood on a table and declared himself the family's expert on fun, describing his brothers brutally. Gerard the perfectionist, Joel the bookworm, and Li Xian as cold and boring. He appointed himself as Lestia's guide to actually enjoying life. Meanwhile, Li Xian chopped a bombshell on Joel. Lestia had successfully read a grimoire, something that should be impossible for an untrained person. Joel was shocked, suspecting Gerard probably knew this would happen, and that it was mentioned in their father's will, which only Gerard had read. This revelation triggered Joel's painful memories of their childhood. Their chronically ill mother had never held Joel, but when baby Li Xian arrived, she cradled him with tenderness the older children had never experienced. Their neglectful father wouldn't visit his dying wife, leaving her lonely and desperate. On her deathbed, all the older boys promise to protect Li Xian. After she died, their father didn't even attend her funeral. Apparently, he had more important things to do than bury his wife. The cruel irony was that Lestia was born the same year their mother died. Joel had originally planned to keep emotional distance from her, viewing her as just another reminder of their family's tragedy. But when he saw Lestia's actual circumstances, living in poverty, suffering abuse, falling through society's cracks, he realized how wrong his assumptions had been. She was completely innocent, a victim of their father's neglect, just as their mother had been. The anger he'd carried for years had nowhere to go, replaced by unexpected protective instincts. Joel's perspective had completely shifted. When Li Xian expressed amazement about Lestia being an interpreter, Joel made it clear that her magical abilities didn't change the fundamental truth: she was their sister, and that was what mattered most. The brothers had found common ground in their desire to protect the sister they never knew they needed. Their family bonding was interrupted when they discovered Matthias had taken his promise to show Lestia fun to dramatic extremes. While Joel and Lycian talked, Matthias had spirited Lestia away from the estate entirely, taking her on what he called a shortcut to show her the world. Sitting in an ornate carriage traveling through countryside, Lestia marveled at seeing the entire village spread below them. When their journey seemed too slow, Matthias decided to create his own route using earth magic. What followed was terrifying. Their carriage went airborne over a cliff as Lestia screamed, "This wasn't a road!" Matthias cheerfully announced he could simply make one, causing the ground to rise and reshape under his control. Purple magical energy flowed from Matthias's hands as he literally moved mountains. This was Lestia's first glimpse of the raw power her brothers wielded, and the potential recklessness that came with it. They arrived in the second biggest town in the Morcadium capital, where Lestia exclaimed how clear the air was and marveled at strange foods unavailable in Verchester. As they walked hand in hand down brick streets, Matthias worried about her, asking if she liked it there. The gray-haired townspeople questioned his worry, making Matthias reflect that he'd never heard such concern from his family even after running away. Meanwhile, Lestia wondered why this person was worried about him. Indoors, Lestia asked if Matthias was okay, mentioning he'd used a lot of magic and she'd heard it could be dangerous. Matthias was amazed that she was actually worried about him, something he'd never experienced before. In flashback, Matthias had been in a bar when someone told him about his younger sister Lestia being brought to the estate. He admitted his curiosity hadn't amounted to much then. Now he declared it was great having a little sister. As they walked past shops, including Patel Doré and Elegance, Lestia happily announced she could read a few words now. Standing before a jewelry store, she identified it as an accessory store. Matthias declared perfect timing and dragged her inside despite her protests. In the jewelry store, Lestia grasped Matthias's arm, insisting she didn't need expensive jewelry. When he asked if it wasn't her taste, she explained everything was pretty, but she simply didn't need it. Matthias, mishearing, told the shopkeeper to wrap everything. Realizing Joel had taken all his money, Matthias faced a dilemma. The shopkeeper suggested a promissory note with his family name, but Matthias declined. Buying gifts for his sister wouldn't mean anything if paid under his family's name. Matthias then produced a glowing green mana neutralization stone, asking the jeweler to keep it safe while he fetched money. He gripped Lestia's arm, explaining there was a place where they could make money and have fun, apparently planning to use his stone as collateral. The scene shifted to a grand casino filled with gamblers at roulette tables and card games because, naturally, Matthias's solution to needing money was to take his innocent sister to a gambling den. At the casino, Lestia observed the dimly lit environment apprehensively as the narrator explained it was a place where one could make money by winning or end up with nothing by losing. Matthias pointed to games, suggesting they play together. At the roulette table, he celebrated winning again, declaring Lestia must be the goddess of fortune. When Lestia seemed quiet, Matthias encouraged her to try playing herself. She worried about losing his winnings, but he insisted she was his lucky charm. Despite her protests that he was simply good at the games, Matthias convinced her to throw dice in a high-stakes match where they'd gone all in. Under pressure, with only 10 seconds to throw or lose everything, Lestia rolled the dice. She threw a perfect 12, double sixes, the highest possible roll. The crowd erupted as Matthias twirled her excitedly, and she felt proud of making him happy. While Matthias went to exchange their chips for a large sack of winnings, Lestia sat at the bar enjoying a strange blue drink topped with whipped cream. She marveled at being a winner and thought about how reading was fun, but the world was exciting too. When she called for her brother, she found only empty space. Matthias had vanished. Under the bright full moon, 2 hooded figures had kidnapped Lestia. They confirmed she was the right target because she'd called Duke Verchester's third son brother. Gagged and crying, Lestia was loaded into a carriage filled with bird cages. The kidnappers were using a pet transport operation as cover. The rescue party, led by Matthias and Joel, confronted the carriage operators, but faced an impossible situation. The carriage belonged to the imperial family, transporting birds to the palace gardens. Touching imperial property would be treason, leaving them with no legal justification to search for Lestia. As the carriage prepared to leave through the moonlit forest, Matthias desperately called out for his sister. Inside, Lestia struggled against her bonds, trying to respond through her gag. Then, faintly, they heard her voice calling, "Brother!" through the darkness. Matthias generated brilliant white magical energy, floating above the trees as he confirmed Lestia was inside. His powerful magic broke the carriage apart, sending everyone, including himself, Joel, and Lysion, plummeting through the forest canopy along with the freed birds and scattered debris. On the forest floor, among feathers and broken cages, Lestia noticed a glowing white butterfly. Lord Lysion approached with a smile as the butterfly grew larger and more radiant, becoming a magnificent entity floating against the dark sky. Under the full moon, Lysion reassured Lestia that the rescue was over and she was safe. With tears of joy and relief, she expressed how happy she was that all her brothers had come to save her. The family was finally reunited in the dark forest, though it had required extraordinary magical intervention to overcome the political constraints of challenging an imperial carriage. Back at the estate, Lestia sat in an ornate room, clearly in pain after the ordeal. Matthias knelt beside her, drowning in guilt and declaring dramatically that it was all his fault for leaving her alone. When he was about to punch the expensive furniture in his distress, Lestia stopped him, not out of concern for his well-being, but because she didn't want him ruining the sofa. As the uncle was being removed, he left behind the supposed memento, a wooden box that was anything but sentimental. The moment it activated, a massive purple shadow creature emerged, targeting Lestia specifically. This was clearly the insect the villain had planned, turning a family visit into an assassination attempt. Lysion threw himself between Lestia and the creature, ordering Franker to evacuate her. The magical entity destroyed Lysion's mana neutralization stone, the very thing preventing Verchester magic from consuming its user. Without it, Lysion's own magic began burning him alive, creating a massive fire threatening the entire estate. The situation became desperate. Without a replacement neutralization stone, Lysion would suffer their father's fate, being devoured by his own magic. As the staff attempted evacuation, and Lysion was trapped in the inferno of uncontrolled power, Lestia made a shocking discovery. She could use magic, but it wasn't Verchester family magic. While everyone debated how to save Lysion, Lestia realized she could locate magical items through some innate ability, specifically the emergency neutralization stone the butler carried. Despite protests about the danger, she insisted she could save him. Her 3 knights initially refused to help, citing their duty to protect her from her own poor judgment. Apparently their oath came with fine print about overriding her decisions. But Lestia's determination led to revelation when she began reading from a grimoire, creating a magic circle that definitely wasn't Verchester magic. The staff realized their helpless young lady had abilities none suspected, confirming Lysion's theory about her being the interpreter, someone who could read and use grimoire magic. The butler, recognizing Lestia might genuinely be their only hope, finally handed over his emergency neutralization stone ring. The incident revealed crucial developments. The villain's network included people with direct access to the family, magical assassination attempts were now in play, and Lestia's rare abilities made her both incredibly valuable and dangerously targeted. The family's protective measures had nearly prevented her from saving one of their own lives. What started as noble privilege meeting harsh reality had evolved into a complex web of magical politics, family protection, and hidden agendas. Lysion found himself slumped face down in the burning library, green mist swirling around him as he groaned about his impending doom, because even near-death experiences require proper theatrical flair. As flames engulfed the bookshelves, he contemplated mortality while thinking of Lestia's bright smile. Just when Lestian was about to have his tragic hero moment, Lestia's voice called out. She appeared floating inside a protective magical sphere like some mystical snow globe. When a chandelier crashed down with all the subtlety of a falling piano, Lestia shielded Lycian with her magical barrier. The rescue team was less than thrilled to find Lestia had charged into a burning building. Gerard was particularly unimpressed with the knights who'd lost track of their charge. Lestia, clutching her book like a magical security blanket, declared nobody had sent her. She came of her own free will. When Lestian pointed out she didn't belong in a fire, she reminded him he'd told her she could decide where she belonged. The real villain emerged. Lestia's uncle had escaped during the chaos. Gerard made it clear he doesn't do forgiveness when it comes to family threats. Standing outside the damaged mansion with tears streaming, Lestia was given the choice of how to deal with her uncle. She declared he needed punishment and she would never forgive him. Meanwhile, the uncle ran through the forests, spitting blood while cursing Lestia. Despite his injuries, he was oddly cheerful about his scheme, laughing about getting paid after 10 years of feeding and housing Lestia, only to sell her out for gold coins. The uncle met with some individuals who gave him a mysterious glowing box that supposedly enhances magic. His mission? Give it to Lestia, or just open it nearby. The payment would double if he succeeded. His celebration was short-lived. While walking through forest toward bright light, someone caught up with him. An arrow found its mark, and the uncle found himself on the ground, looking up in shock at his attacker with surprise. Guards in fancy blue and gold uniforms captured the uncle. Apparently, kind Princess Lestia had insisted they bring him back alive, though the guards seemed to have different preferences. In the throne room interrogation, Lestia confronted her uncle, surrounded by Gerard and Lucian. The uncle tried his innocent act, claiming he'd only brought a memento of her mother. His story fell apart when he started ranting that Lestia couldn't be anyone's true sister and calling her a wench. Lucian decided to demonstrate the Verchester way of dealing with liars through creative interrogation techniques. However, just as the uncle was about to reveal the truth about the mysterious box, something went wrong. He began vomiting blood and literally disintegrated into gray powder and bird-like smoke, a magical kill switch to keep secrets buried. Lucian quickly shielded Lestia's eyes from the gruesome spectacle. At a villa on the capital's outskirts, Lucian officially welcomed Lestia to the family with a ring ceremony, though she put it on the wrong finger. Brothers Lucian and Matthias engaged in sibling bickering. Matthias accused Lucian of being too harsh and corrupting their 11-year-old sister, while Lucian pointed out Matthias was the only Verchester who couldn't use the family's mysterious authority. Investigation revealed the disintegration magic was linked to the imperial family, specifically the crown prince, making Lestia a target due to her interpreter abilities. Gerard decided to send Lestia to the duchy for safety while investigating further. In a touching final scene, Matthias visited Lestia in her room, where she dealt with survivor's guilt over the fire and her uncle's fate. She wondered aloud if there wasn't a way for people to be punished, repent, and still have everyone live happily ever after. Refreshingly idealistic from someone who'd just witnessed magical disintegration. The brothers reassured her that none of it was her fault, explaining her uncle had likely been enchanted. Despite officially becoming part of the Verchester family, Lestia confessed she wasn't happy and felt like her brothers kept getting into trouble because of her. This tale is filled with magical fires, family betrayal, political intrigue, and the lesson about not accepting mysterious glowing boxes from sketchy relatives. Liddy sat alone with tears streaming down her face when Matthias appeared beside her with a firm, "Don't cry," pulling her into an enthusiastic embrace. In the ornate room, Matthias held his sister and had a moment of brutal self-reflection, admitting he'd made up his mind to treat Liddy better than anyone else ever had, but it's not that easy. Liddy, still in his embrace, delivered surprisingly mature wisdom. That's not true. You're a really fun and good person, Brother Matthias. Even now, you came to see me. But Matthias launched into self-deprecating speech, calling himself an incompetent, horrible person, and wondering how he could cheer her up when she was sad. This was when Liddy dropped an emotional truth bomb. "You're wrong, Brother Matthias. This is the first time anyone's ever cheered me up before." She continued, practically glowing with happiness. "I'm happy that someone can cheer me up when I'm sad." Liddy explained her family history like testimony in the court of dysfunctional relatives. "Father, mother, and even my brothers never did anything like this for me. You're my first relative to ever worry about me, and the only relative who has ever cheered me up. Everything you have done for me truly warms my heart." This emotional honesty caused flowers and sparkles to appear as Matthias lifted Liddy off the ground in a Disney-level moment of sibling affection. "I adore you, little sister," he exclaimed. After brief negotiation, Liddy capitulated with, "Okay, I adore you too, Brother Matthias." And Matthias declared, "Just as I expected, my sister's the prettiest when she smiles." Lysion, who had been watching this emotional breakthrough like a family dynamics scientist, commented with amused satisfaction, "Look at that, Matthias. I sent you to do the cheering up, but you were the one who was cheered up instead." Matthias had to admit Lysion was right, reflecting on how both he and Lestia had supported each other. His final realization, "Who would have thought that I'd have two younger siblings more mature than me? I think I know who I have to protect now." Lysion decided it was time for food. A red-haired maid appeared pushing a serving cart prepared for a small army. The luxurious table was set with sparkling dishes that made Lestia exclaim in awe. Everything had been prepared while Matthias and Lestia were hugging, because apparently this household operated on the principle that emotional breakthroughs should be followed by excessive amounts of food. When Dora tried convincing Lestia to taste the soup, Matthias made his pitch. "Liddy, it's our first time having a meal together. Come on, please." This emotional manipulation worked, and Lestia capitulated with, "How can I refuse? I'd love to." The family assembled at the opulent table with yellow soup, roasted chicken, large cuts of meat, salads, bread, wine glasses, and a twinkling candelabra. Just as they were settling in, Joel appeared, asking permission to join them. Lestia immediately welcomed him, and Gerard mused about how having everyone together was even better than just eating with Lysion. When Lestia asked if the Duke should join them, Gerard explained the table was for 4 and there wasn't enough space. In the room with its massive gold chandelier, someone announced the next phase of family bonding. "Since our home and belongings all went up in flames, let's go shopping again." Gerard promised with fork raised like a solemn vow, "I promise to stay by your side this time," apparently referencing some previous shopping expedition that had gone spectacularly wrong. The conversation devolved into a family intervention in chibi form, with Gerard laying down the law. "Dummy, you better not be thinking about taking her to the casino again. Any trips outside will be done in a group. You can't leave alone with Matthias anymore, okay?" The response was laughter, and Lestia's declaration of, "I'm happy," against glowing geometric shapes, suggesting even chaotic family dynamics were better than her previous experience. Gerard decided Lestia would go to the Northwest Duchy for safety. Staying near the Crown Prince was too dangerous. Lestia admitted she'd never left the capital before, reflecting on her transformation. "In the world I knew, up until now, everyone treated me coldly, and my entire life revolved around a shack in the slums. My small world is expanding faster than I expected." The brothers reassured her they'd all accompany her. Lysion, Joel, and even Gerard, making it a full family expedition. As they prepared to leave via Grand Staircase, they encountered the Duke. Gerard requested an etiquette instructor for Lestia. while she worried she wasn't good enough for the Duke. Just as Gerard was preparing for some confrontation, a man announced His Highness, the Crown Prince, invited the Duke to breakfast. The silence that followed was probably audible across the estate. Matthias, unable to contain his opinions, asked Lestia if their oldest brother was a jerk. Lestia made a perceptive observation. There's something strange about Lord Lysion. It's like he's always on the outside of what's happening, even with his own family. And he's the youngest, but it feels like he's always looking down his nose at everyone else. The story revealed the sinister plot behind recent events. A wooden box with gold latch sat ominously. It contained mana enhancer, designed to test if Lestia could use magic. If she could, she'd suffer unbearable pain. If she was ordinary, she'd be gravely injured when it exploded. Either outcome would force the Verchesters to ask the imperial family for help. This should have been more than enough to corner Gerard, the narrator concluded with frustration, but my plan failed. At the Crown Prince's breakfast invitation, he greeted Gerard with suspicious enthusiasm in an ornate courtyard. "You look better than I expected," he remarked, possibly hoping otherwise. The conversation grew ominous when the prince gestured toward an ornate birdcage. "I was planning on having a pet inside that birdcage. There was an accident on its way here, so the cage is empty. But I'll get my little bird soon enough." Gerard's clenched fists told the real story beneath their polite pleasantries. Gerard demonstrated his dramatic approach to dining by using magic to wilt nearby sunflowers because their scent was ruining his meal. This display caused his companion to lose mana control and call for guards. The Crown Prince criticized the man's inability to handle one Verchester and offered birds and a gardener as compensation. The scene shifted to the heartwarming family trip to the Verchester Duchy by the ocean. Lestia was absolutely enchanted by her first glimpse of the ocean, pressing her face against the carriage window. Joel offered her snacks, while Matthias mocked this strategy and Lysion quietly worried, despite telling himself she was no longer his concern. The family dynamic was charmingly chaotic. Joel promised to show Lestia the time of her life at the beach. Everyone ganged up on Matthias about his supervision skills until Lestia sweetly declared she was on his side. At the port, Matthias excitedly dragged Lestia out to see the massive ships bearing Verchester lion crests. She marveled at standing on top of water and experienced unprecedented freedom. The brothers watched with obvious affection, though Lestia became self-conscious about staring at Lysion's beautiful golden eyes hidden under his hood. Their family moment was interrupted when someone shouted for Duke Verchester to halt, ending on a cliffhanger with everyone looking surprised and a carriage screeching to a stop. If you love stories like this, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you'll never miss the next episode. Because it's really interesting, and if you want the next part, comment the name Lestia.